Welcome to Wine Soundtrack Australia. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world.
In 30 ounces, discover their stories, personalities and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of the Wine Soundtrack. My name is Priscilla Hennicum. I'm here in Clare Valley and Claymore Wines with Clarissa Major. How are you today?
I'm remarkably well, thank you. Remarkably pink, actually, which might need some explanation because this is a non-visual medium. But anyway, yes, no, really well, thank you.
Love it, answer. So tell me about Clare Valley. Since you are the first winery to come to visit the podcast in Clare Valley, what's the Clare Valley is different of the other regions in Australia?
Oh, the Clare's a very beautiful little region formed of a lot of quite, I think, powerful but small family producers. If we're talking about our wine industry, we're situated about 150 k's north of Adelaide, so the capital of SA, and we're really that edge of the outback. So if you're travelling north from Adelaide to head out bush, on your way up to Ayers Rock, to Alice Springs, and further up to Darwin, before you hit that big brown red dirt country, we're sort of that Garden of the North. So that last little outpost of big gum trees and beautiful green vineyard at the right time of year, of course. Midwinter we're a bit sparse. And before that we get this we're reasonably elevated as a region, so there's slightly milder ripening conditions that you see from some of our immediate neighbours. So an immediate 80 k's down the road we've got the Barossa, a touch further you've got Adelaide Hills, which is obviously quite cool. And then south of town, Adelaide, you've got the Vale, so McLaren Vale, etc. Where we are, we get quite warm conditions over summer. It gets quite hot, can certainly track up to the 40s. But what we find, because we're a little bit more elevated, our nighttime ripening temperatures through that key period in summer are a touch cooler, a little bit more moderate. So the wines we produce are what we would describe as being really powerfully elegant styles. And that's from big reds, so still carrying 14.5 to 15% alcohol, but with amazing natural acid and bright colour, right through to the Rieslings we produce, which I think we are quite rightly famous for.
International, everyone knows the Riesling from Clare Valley. What's the secret about the Riesling from Clare?
Oh, it's definitely site, so it's definitely, we're a little oasis here. We absolutely are. So you drive up into the region and it's a series of about 6 or 7 interconnected valleys that lie between probably 380 to say 450 metres above sea level. I think average vineyard elevation is around 420, but seriously, don't quote me. If someone knows better, I'm happy to be proven wrong. But it's actually the second highest region in the state. So our Rieslings get the benefit of lovely warm ripening, so we get full flavour, but beautiful structural elements around our acidity, so long as we've got good canopy management here and reasonable vigour to protect what are quite delicate grapes, the Riesling grapes, from sunburn. You get beautiful, pristine, clean and quite delicate fruit flavours that persist. So it's an anomaly, I guess, to describe it as this, but we think our Rieslings are full-bodied, yet light white wines, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely is a good description. So how many hectares of land do you have here, or you actually do you have vineyards? Do you have vineyards?
We do. We've got a suite of vineyard plantings in the region, so it's all Clare Valley where we own, situated from Auburn at the southern gateway to the region as far north as Penwortham, which is actually one of the highest points in the area, and it's quite central. And across that, I think we've got about 140 acres under vine now, with capacity to plant out a little more. And as we look at accessing extra water allocation, we'll consider that too. Vast majority of our plantings are dry growing, so we've probably only got access to irrigation water on maybe a third of what we've got in the ground. And where the Clare Valley lies geographically, we're actually quite exposed to the impact of climate change. Sorry, climate deniers, we believe it's real. And what we're seeing is reliance on supplementary irrigations becoming more significant. So it's an impact on how much we can yield. So we're seeing our yields decline, quality's being retained, which is awesome. But yeah, we are a dry little part of the world. Yeah.
I think not just Clare Valley, Australia in general is quite dry country in general words.
Oh, look, there's a classic, I reckon it was a West End beer ad from when I was growing up in the 80s. And their moniker was, it's brewed in the driest state in the driest continent on earth to slake thirst. So South Australia is known to be one of those little dry outposts. Couldn't tell it today, thankfully, 25th of June, and it's raining cats and dogs out there. I tell you what, I nearly did a rain dance. I'm bloody happy to see it, I'll be honest.
I love rain, so I can't complain about that. So what type of wine you have here? You have a red, white, anything else?
Yeah, we produce across the range. So the classic regional varietals that we focus on are Riesling, Shiraz, Grenache, Cabernet. I love the local Malbec. We actually don't grow it, so we rely on grower source for that. But I think Malbec in the Clare Valley is one of those overlooked classic varietals. But then further in the range, we take some varietals out of the hills. So I've got a little sparkling we do as a cellar door release. It's a Adelaide Hills Chardy, a Blanc de Blanc, which is a bit of fun, especially come Christmas time. Good one for breakfast. Pour it over your cornflakes, that's my gourmet tip on that one. We produce a rosé as well, which I'm really proud of, and that's pretty much a limited to cellar door release too. Very early picked. This year's has just come out. It's an Adelaide Hills Sanji, low alcohol, really fine, really delicate, but nice and dry. So, yeah.
And delicious. I just try it. Amazing. Love it. So how many bottles per year do you produce?
Sitting around 35,000 12 bottled units, so 9 litre units per annum at the minute. We had been constrained in production the last 2 years, so 19 and 20. We talked about the drought, we talked about the dry conditions, we talked about the fact we don't have a lot of water. So guess what? You don't get a lot of grapes when you don't get a lot of water. It's a really simple equation. So 19 and 20 were assigned to us in the vineyards. It started actually, to be honest, in 18 as well. And so we had a couple of years there where we pulled back on our production, our grape intake, and we sat probably closer to like a 300-tonne crush. But this year we've bumped it back up and we've seen just over 450 tonne go through the winery. Not all our own, but obviously a fair chunk of that's off a state-grown vineyard. And hopefully we'll see those volumes grow from 35 just nice and gently and slowly. Yeah.
Good. So do you sell overseas as well and here in Australia? So how the percentage between domestic market and export market?
We're definitely more domestic focused, and that's been the backbone of what we do. We've got strong brand connection because we haven't talked about our labelling at all, but our branding reflects the Boss's record collection, so there's a very strong music theme. So the name of your podcast, The Wine Soundtrack, is so fitting because if I start to rattle them off, you'll get it. So the very first rock and roll reference that we made was our Dark Side of the Moon Shiraz, which we actually don't export that into the US because of IP conflicts. So it goes over there as Walk on the Wild Side. Thank you, Lou Reed. And our Joshua Tree Riesling, which is a tribute to you too. So basically our labels pay homage and tribute to some of the music that gets us excited, that we're passionate about, that we love. And then as an offshoot, one of the concurrent passions of the boss and the founder is the Liverpool Football Club. Wears his red heart on his sleeve. And so we've got a series of wines that are You'll Never Walk Alone, which is originally, I think, Rodgers and Hammerstein. Carousel was a musical through the 40s, but Jerry and the Pacemakers took it to number 1 in the charts in the UK at a period where Liverpool were performing really well. Under the tutelage of a bloke by the name of Bill Shankly. Believe me, I wasn't a Liverpool supporter when I started here, but geez, you got to know your stuff once you start, because we've got a lot of fans that actually like drinking our wine and celebrating a win with a glass of the You Never Walk Alone. So, but the song itself is beautiful, and there's a sense in that of being a community and being family. So that overarching sentiment is quite universal and something that we hold quite dear. So.
And we have one as well in your honor. Yeah, it's called Miss Education Clarissa Majan. Do you want to talk to us about this wine?
Yes, I can talk about it. I drink a bit of it, but I probably shouldn't admit to having a palate preference. So we have a very small release of some two artisan alternatives that we do. So artisan being under sort of 500, well, the original release under 200 case production. The first of those came about in 2016. My winemaker at the time had some great relationships with growers locally, and one of the local guys in Auburn had some surplus to Sangiovese and Tempranillo. And I get a call as I'm headed down to catch up with the boss, who is a practicing GP, to do a vintage debrief. And she says, "Hey, do you want to make a Tempranillo?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love to. I love Tempranillo. I think out of Clare, it's underrated. Blah blah blah." We're ranting on. She goes, "Well, I've got this grower. He's got like 3-4 ton of it left. He can't sell. It's at a really good price. I reckon it'd work really well." I'm like, "Oh, the boss really wants commercial volumes. It's not going to be big enough for, but we do need something a little more esoteric to put through the cellar door and DTC only." Okay, so we sat in the car, we crunched the numbers, we did up the cogs workings, we worked out a marketing plan, we figured, right, this is going to be, and like, okay, yeah, I can do this. I'm headed in. She goes, "Oh, well, do you want to make a Sangiovese as well?" I'm like, hell, might as well. So I walked in, caught up with the boss, and he goes, "So, how's vintage going?" I said, "Well, we're going to make a Tempranillo." And he went, "We are we?" Right. I went, No, you don't understand. It'll be artisan. DTC will make good margin despite the low volumes because it's all going to be direct. Something different in cellar door. They won't get it anywhere else. And blah, 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 blah. As you notice, I can talk, right? Yeah, I can talk. So anyway, I think he put his hands in the air and went, "Oh, okay, fine. We're making a Tempranillo." He goes, "Right, what else is going on?" I said, "Well, making a Sangiovese too." And at that point, I think he just dusted his hands and walked away. But I'd been on board with the brand for probably about 10 years at that point, or maybe just under, maybe 8 years. And we'd worked together quite well for a long time. He had wanted to stick my name on a bottle. I'd never asked or expected it. But he decided, as a tribute to me and for my persuasiveness, let's say my assertiveness in my position, or perhaps I just bullied him into it, who knows, he'd create a label that was the Miseducation of Clarissa Major. So a tribute or a reference to the album by Lauryn Hill, which was her first solo album. And it coincided with being nominated as a finalist in the Women in Wine Awards. So the first release was a 16 vintage. We released in 17, and we launched it around the awards night presentation, and it was actually really humbling and really beautiful. So I was like, great, it's once off. We've got like 180 boxes. It's all good. It got great raps from trade and press. And so 2 years later, we went back and made like 400 boxes of it. So yes. And I still drink a lot of it, and I am still very proud of it. And the fact that, so my nomination was a workplace champion of change. So at the time I ran a full female team, which I was very proud of. So my winemaking team, marketing, sales, everything. So the poor boss. There's a great Christmas lunch that he took us over to Fino at Seppeltsfield, and he's just surrounded by this bevy of women at lunch. You could just see him shaking his head like, "Oh no."
And why Tempranillo? Is your favourite grape, or just because came along?
Oh no, I do. At that time, back in 2016, these alternative varietals or emerging varietals were really just starting to make a presence felt in the Clare Valley. We are a traditional region. I think we've possibly been a little slower than some of our other Adelaide Hills, McLaren Vale in picking up some of these alternatives. And what I had tried locally, Sangiovese was more widely planted and accepted, but I didn't love it. It didn't have the flavour depth and that inherent structure. I tried a couple of local Tempranillo, and blended with Shiraz, I thought these actually work quite well. The opportunity to play with the single solo varietal without having to blend, it just stood out, and it still does. It's got beautiful structure, a really lovely tannic grip. The primary fruit profile of it is quite interesting. It's not one-dimensional. It's got layers of even primary fruit character, and we don't play with a lot of oak with either of these styles. You're talking between 6 and 9 months in older hogsheads. And that's it, because we want to preserve that primary fruit lift. But it doesn't need it. It's got good weight. And I mean, it's just delicious. It's great food wine. It's great drink on your own wine. It is really good. So, yeah.
Do you like to tell us a little bit about the story in Nero when he came into Australia and started the business? Because he's not winemaker background, right?
No, not at all. No. Anura's love for the Liverpool Football Club began because he studied in Liverpool. So he lived there for somewhere between 10 and 15 years. All these glory years. You know those years where you're infallible? That's the period of time that he spent in Liverpool. His parents believed in the value of education beyond all else, and his two older brothers had been sent abroad to study as well. So he was a Malaysian-born, now naturalised Australian, and has lived in Australia for probably nearly 30 years. So that's where the passion for the club comes from. And he was practicing medicine, so he graduated, studied medicine, started practicing in the UK. And his older siblings had wound up in Australia, and they said, you know what, you're thinking about starting a family. Adelaide is an amazing city. It's a great lifestyle, and this would be a great place for you. Well, here in Adelaide, you shake a bush and a winemaker jumps out of it. So I don't think it took him long to fall in with the wrong crowd, or maybe the right crowd, depending on how it goes. And he met up with other medicos who had interest in the wine industry and in Clare, and he started playing around with a little bit of wine production up here, and in 98 created Claymore Wines. So Claymore is a Scottish broadsword, and it's probably the one thing that is a little more traditional in our labelling and branding, and it is a very, I find, sort of oblique reference to non-compromise and integrity. You know, that Scottish broadsword you use to defend your home, maintain your honour. And I'm like, okay, so why this broadsword? He said, well, life's too bad, too short to drink shit wine, so you might as well make sure what you put in the bottle stands up. So that's his connection to it. The very first labels he released, he is a music nut, but they were classical musical references very, very early on in the piece. We had a nocturne in the range and a duet, and it was far more grown up, terribly conservative. Not necessarily the wines, but the labelling. And he tells a story that basically the light bulb went off one night. He was drinking a mate Shiraz out of McLaren Vale and listening to Pink Floyd, and he said, oh man, I've got to make a Dark Side of the Moon Shiraz. I just got to do this. And it's seriously about true passion. These are tributes to, the music that's inspired him. And I think what we've ended up with in the bottle is awesome. So that first Dark Side of the Moon release came out in 1998. Simultaneous to that, the Joshua Tree Riesling was released in 1998. We had an awesome time when U2 did their Joshua Tree tour here a couple of years ago. Oh my God, pre-COVID days, what we could do. So we took out a corporate box at Adelaide Oval. We sent in all of our new release Joshua Tree Riesling. We hosted a heap of our wine club members and just rocked on to the wee hours. And U2, at that age, are crackerjack performers. So seriously, if our wine with that much time in the bottle can still be a crackerjack performer, I'm happy for it to be a tribute to U2. Yeah, no.
Did you send in wine to U2?
There is some connection. No, we haven't, but there is no. Bono has a cousin, apparently, who lives in Port Adelaide. So, who has made themselves known to Anura, and I believe we have sent wine through family just to say, hey, dude, you inspire us and we love you. But that's before my time, which is saying something, because my time with the brand's quite lengthy. So there you go.
So a question like more about you and the business. Do you guys believe each vintage is different? Each vintage tell you a different story?
Absolutely. Yep. And specifically when you're looking at low-yielding, site-specific, dry-growing blocks of fruit, you get a very different story told each year. And there are some years, and in the hotter years that we've had recently, where we're picking Riesling and Shiraz same day, which is absolutely mind-blowing and remarkable. So Riesling comes off first drop, and then you've got Shiraz that's ripened up so stupidly early that it's being picked that night. And then you have other years where your spring rainfall and those sort of early conditions supporting that grand period of growth in the vineyard have been much kinder. You've got a later ripening and sugar accumulation, and you've got longer time. If you've got mild summer conditions and we're not hit with heaps of heat, so you've got naturally more protected fruit on the vine. You've got longer ripening conditions and different flavour development happening over that, and all of that then comes back to what your site is actually informing. And, after 3 or 4 consecutive years of below average rainfall, our vineyards are really struggling with groundwater reserves. If they're dry growing, those roots are down a long way, but they're pretty much going, like, give me a break, mate.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that results in lower yields. Now, we've got an eye for that, and we are quite conservative in our viticulture and pruning practice in particular to try and support what we can from the vines. But there are, it's a direct impact on cost, if nothing else. But you do have to actively manage for quality in those conditions.
How did you start to work in the wine industry? How did this passion come from? Tell us.
I fell in love with a winemaker.
Really?
Yeah.
From Claymore?
No. From the Clare Valley. We're divorced now. But
Can we still share this story?
it's all good. There's nothing acrimonious, but it was a beautiful 10 years and the formative years in my time in the industry. And his family had a small, very boutique brand locally, little organic vineyard. We're making their wines on site, and I fell in love with it. I'd lived overseas for a year, so I actually went to school in the Barossa, believe it or not. I went to high school in the Barossa, good Lutheran girl, non-practicing, sorry mum. And I ended up in Germany for a year. So I did a school exchange with a sister school program, and I lived in Hamburg in the north, Hamburg. If you're actually any internationals, that's a Hamburgish accent. So I've lost it a little bit now. And I got to travel through Europe through that time. And I'm a little country girl who grew up in a cattle station in the southern Kimberley because my dad's a cattleman from way back. But we had a farming property at the southern end of the valley here in Saddleworth. We'd come down for the wet season. So I'd grown up in quite remote and regional areas in Australia. I'd always been a country girl. And next thing I found myself in Hamburg, in Berlin for my 18th. I spent my 18th birthday in Berlin. It was crazy. Lots of underground bars. It was awesome. Yep, navigating the Reeperbahn with friends of mine in Hamburg as well. Did the Reading Festival, went up to Edinburgh Festival. So I had this whole world of culture, arts, probably less interested in the food and wine. Drank a lot of beer over there. Sorry. And I landed back in the Clare Valley, and I didn't really know what I wanted to study. I'd deferred my university, and I fell into the wine industry. It was an industry that was international and outward looking and attracted young people from diverse backgrounds that had different life experiences. And did I mention I can talk? Yeah, right. So I found that exchange, that cellar-door consumer interface really exciting. I didn't have a great passion for wine, but it didn't take long. I actually kicked off my career with Knapstein Wines. And at the time, Tim Knapstein was still on board, but then Petaluma purchased them and Andrew Hardy came in within about 6 months. And Andrew Hardy was and is super passionate about sharing information and education. So he'd bring the entire team, whether from your officer, admin staff to winemaking team to cellar door in. Once a month or every 6 weeks, we'd do a full tasting in the lab. And I got to try Alsatian Gewürztraminer, I got to try German Rieslings, a beautiful French champagne. And at the same time was in that place, asked my opinion, what I thought of these wines, how I felt about them. And as an 18-year-old who drank beer for a year in Germany, I had a lot to contribute to that conversation. Oh, yeah. But my confidence grew, and they fostered that, and they really encouraged it. So Andrew actually asked me to do a vintage with them, which I survived. I probably didn't succeed at. I'm not a pumps and hoses kind of girl, right? And I own that. And my partner's a horticulturalist. He won't let me prune our roses, right? Okay, so let alone a vine. But yeah, so I had that broader experience. And then when my boyfriend then became husband, asked me to come into his business, I had a much broad-reaching sort of understanding. So I studied wine marketing through the Adelaide University externally while working. And I loved it. It was much smaller than where I am now, very much start to finish. So we actually got to the point where we imported an Italian bottling line. So we had our organic vineyards produced on site and then bottled on site as well. So all that process I found fascinating, but it was the human exchange that I loved most of it. Wine's a great social lubricant, and the stories that come out of it, not just my stories, but everybody else's that you get to share with a bottle was great. Yeah. So, yeah. So
it's about passion, right?
Oh, yeah. It is, absolutely. And look, when we separated, I think I was like, I'm going to go live in Spain. I'm going to run away. I'm going to do all these things. And you know what? It's 14 years later and I've got 3 kids and I'm a proud Clare Valley wine producer. So my heart and soul's here in this dirt, I reckon.
And now we talk about you have tasted so many wines and in this whole process about learning about wines. How many bottles today is needed to get you drunk?
You know what? I inherited from my father a great capacity to consume.
Great capacity.
Great capacity.
So many bottles.
Look, to get me drunk and happy, you could probably get me there with a glass or 2, but to actually get me to fall over,
like a 3 or 4?
I reckon I'd easily hit the 3 to 4 mark. Yeah.
Good. And sparkling, red, white, or everything?
You got to be careful. You got to be a bit careful about mixing these things. I don't mind starting with sparkling light, finishing with the reds. I'm happy to work my way through it. You throw a gin in there and bang, I'm gone. Honestly, yeah. And I have spent some time in China and the whole gumbai thing with the Chinese wine. Oh, no. And will not be touching that again in my short life because that's a matter of about 3 cups of that and you're gone.
You're gone. Do you match wine? Like, did you like match wines with, like, do you have any rules about white wine with fish or red wine with meat, or you just drink and eat how it is?
I mentioned I got 3 kids, right?
3 kids? Oh my God.
So your priorities change when you have children. So the early years when I was incredibly immersed and much more foodie, you know, like, and it's not just the spaghetti bolognese, etc. We would actually put a bit more effort into choosing wines to go with what we're serving, you know.
Today is just to see what it is in the fridge.
I curate the selection in the fridge. Yeah, but there's a day, and often I'm more dictated by my personal feeling and what I feel like my body needs, as opposed to what the food on the plate tells me it should have. However, I will absolutely, Clare Valley Riesling and fresh shucked oysters from the West Coast, that is a match made in heaven. Cabernet Sauvignon with pancetta or prosciutto with an olive tapenade and rosemary sea salt grissini sticks. That is a match made in heaven. And honestly, just a beautiful aged Shiraz with a steak and garlic butter. Oh, you know, there are some classics you can rely on.
So I agree. So I think your match is actually seems like it very, very nice. So now we talk about food. Complete the sentence. A day without wine is like?
A day without wine? Oh, that's usually a day after we've done the sporting run around with kids or something. Oh my God. No, it's a day without wine has to be endured.
Enjoy it. A table without wine? Table?
Oh, a table without wine is a sad occasion.
Sad occasion.
Yeah.
You will cry?
Oh, I might weep a little tear inside, you know. It's just not quite the same. I don't drink soft drink. I have this thing that bubbly soft drinks don't work for me. So for me, it's wine or water. And I tell you what, I think we all know which one we prefer.
2021 vintage for you guys. It was a good vintage?
Yeah, we're really happy with it. It's certainly not a return to bumper yield, but it's an improved yield. Quality is pretty fantastic across the board. Natural acidity across reds and whites this year has been absolutely fantastic. And we did our first 21 red grading of all the red parcels post-mallow only about a week and a half ago. And the quality that I'm seeing there is really quite exceptional. The Clare Valley stuff in particular is standout. So we've looked at some little parcels out of Langhorne Creek and Adelaide Hills as well, predominantly around alternatives that we're looking to play with. And they are standing up, but it's the Clare stuff that gets you really excited. I got some Shiraz from Clare. We produce a reserve Shiraz each year, and often that allocation is decided in vineyard. This year we had like 3 different parcels and sites in the vineyard that we went, this is looking really exciting. And what we've now ended up with, my reserve Shiraz is maybe a 4,500 litre finished blend. Occasionally we've had bump years, we go, oh my God, we've got 8,000 or 9,000 litres we can allocate to this. This year I've got 20,000 litres of reserve quality Shiraz. Now, it's early days. A lot can happen in maturation, but to have that as an initial resource, you just go, wow, this is awesome. Yeah, it's a luxury.
It's a luxury. So what do you think the people you drink in the future? So do you still think like more white, more reds, more fortified, or you don't know about the climate change? What's your opinion about the future and wine and drinkers' future?
It really depends where you are. I think the Australian wine consumer has a very different, they're at a different stage of their palate maturation, I suppose, and understanding and knowledge as to consumers from the old world who've got this amazing heritage of wine consumption. So we're still very much in experimentation phase, and we are infants in the industry when you think about it, but it gives us great capacity to experiment, and we can break rules, or we can make all new rules and then decide to break them. So I think what's happening universally is that there is a trend towards more finely structured, more balanced, slightly more elegant styles, whether they be red or white. There is certainly great interest in alternatives, but what I think we're also seeing is it's not just the Australian punters had a history of being more comfortable with, that's a Shiraz, that's a Riesling, that's a Cabernet. Like, oh, look, this is a blend of like 5 indiscriminate varieties, a la great Rhone blends from the south of France. We're now seeing people play with that, not necessarily along the Rhone varietals, but that style and that sort of, to make just great wines. And that's what I mean about the rule-breaking, rule-making, I think. And I think the punter is more open to being delivered something that is a fruit salad in the bottle. But, and I use that word a little bit concernedly because classically the fruit salad reference in winemaking is it's a negative connotation. But I think what we're seeing is people going, you know what, this goes with that, bang, So I think we're more open to experimentation. But I think generally those big blockbuster, heavily oaked styles that we saw come out of the 80s and 90s have had their day. We're definitely looking at elegance and a lighter hand. I think there is a place for what people are doing around natural winemaking. I am not personally a fan of the orange wine movement, but, let people do it. Let them give it a go. And if it yields something new and interesting and fun that we go, oh, Jesus, check that one out. Yeah. It's all about expanding your knowledge base. I mean, otherwise we're going to sit here forever and go, yeah, my Riesling's awesome. No, I don't need to drink anyone else's. I'm sorry. Yeah. It's an incredibly insular view that's not going to deliver you opportunity to grow professionally from a production perspective. None of that. Yeah.
That's so good. So, right. That is actually the most important time. We are play a game. Are you ready?
I was born ready, baby.
Love it. So I tell you some famous people in the world, and I would like you just to matching wines or grapes. It's up to you. If you have any wine in your mind or grapes to match with these famous people, right?
So what I think they would drink, maybe?
Yes, or because the personality or something you like, what look like. We can just matching whatever you feel like. So the first person I would like to ask you is like Michael Jackson.
Oh, Michael Jackson. Oh, Thriller, baby. That is on quite common rotation in our, Michael Jackson. Well, we had Bubbles, didn't he? The monkey. I reckon he'd be a rosé fan. I have
rosé.
I just think a lovely dry, sort of
Sangiovese rosé.
Just possibly, but he might be more like a gin cocktail kind of bloke actually. But yeah. So let's go a rosé gin fizz cocktail.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. And Beyonce.
Oh, she's got to be champagne. I'm sorry, and I have to put the whole Aussie thing out there. So no, she is a consumer because she's definitely still a champagne drinker. I was going to go with a great Tasmanian sparkling, but nah, she's drinking a bolly, a vintage bolly. Yep.
And Brad Pitt.
Oh, Brad.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Fight Club, Brad Pitt. Yep. Oh, okay.
You need to get something like handsome like him.
It's got to be something with a bit of structure, but it's not cut from the standard cloth. Like he's a little bit of an individual. So I wouldn't go Shiraz with him. I'm
Why not?
Shirazes can be a little more generic, unfortunately, and safe. I mean, Fight Club, he doesn't play it safe, dude. No. I reckon we got to look at Cabernet, but with a splash of something. Cabernet maybe with a little...
It's like a blend?
Yeah, I'm thinking of Malbec. Throw some Malbec.
Cabernet Malbec. Do you have one, yeah? Do you have one wine?
We do, yeah. London Calling. It's our punk rock wine, mate. Yeah.
For Brad Pitt?
Yeah, I'd give Brad Pitt a go. Doesn't he drink tequila? Is he the tequila bloke?
I'm not sure.
I'm sure he's got a spirit. I'm sure that there's some... Anyway.
Right. Michelle Obama.
You know what? There's part of me that thinks I go Michelle Obama Chardonnay, like a classic, either white Burgundy or an Adelaide Hills.
Oaky Chardonnay?
Moderately oak, but with a light hand. So really beautiful French oak. It's integrated. It's got malolactic and it's been fully worked, but it's got natural acid and balance and poise and longevity. Yeah. I might be a fan of Michelle Obama, in case you hadn't noticed. Yeah.
And Nelson Mandela?
Oh, Nelson Mandela.
Oh, I like the way you say. Oh,
yeah. He's got to be like an aged Cabernet, I would suggest.
Which vintage for Nelson Mandela?
Oh.
This would be a good one from Australia.
Good vintage Cabernet from Australia. Oh, I'm thinking back to something like 06 maybe even. 2012, really good cool ripening conditions in Clare. So if I want to go on my local knowledge, a 12 Cabernet, good longevity, but by that stage, age, so it's dusty and complex and interesting, and you just want to sit there and soak it up. Like he would be the most interesting man to sit down and have at the dinner table. Yeah.
With Cabernet Sauvignon 2006.
Yeah, and a mature cheddar. That's all you'd need. A really beautiful, sharp, mature cheddar, Cabernet, and then you would just listen. You would just, sit and savour the words that come out of his mouth.
I enjoy you for that conversation.
You know what? I reckon we charge a bucket load for that conversation. Anyway.
The last one. Someone very clever. Bill Gates.
Oh, but he's a bit... I mean, yes, he might be clever, but is he terribly engaging? No, he's very philanthropic, great supporter of the arts, but he's not someone that speaks to me from the heart, which is possibly, his marketing machine might be not doing him favour. Bill Gates. Oh, part of me, you know what? He's going to be a Shiraz man. Yeah.
Do you think Shiraz for him?
Oh, yeah.
Barossa Shiraz? Clare Valley Shiraz?
You know what? Hunter Valley. That might be unkind. Oh, I'm sorry if that's unkind, Bill. Anyway, no. Potentially, maybe he's a bit sassy. Maybe he's actually more like a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, but a good one. Yeah, a good one.
Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand for him?
I'm looking at the more traditional stuff, aren't I? Because I just don't find him terribly exciting as an individual. That's terrible.
You're so good with this game. Do you know that?
Oh, really? Well, there's no right or wrong answers, right? So it's more just like a conversation and, my take on people.
Thank you so much, Clarissa, for that. Would you like to remind us how to reach your cellar door here in Clare Valley? And please, your website address?
Yeah, sure thing. So we're actually quite easy to find, but don't use your maps or your Google function, okay? So
why not?
Because it takes you like 20 k's north of us, all right? So we are located at 7145 on Horrocks Highway in Leasingham, which is actually a little hamlet. So a hamlet is like, it's not a village. It doesn't have a pub. It doesn't have a post office. A hamlet is just a gathering of houses. So Leasingham's a hamlet, and we're about 10 kilometres north of Auburn, which is the very first town at the southern gateway of the Clare Valley. And we're right on Horrocks Highway, which is the main road that runs through town. So once you get to Auburn, use your sat-nav to get you there. Turn it off, keep your eyes open, look out the window, or the navigator look out the window. Sorry, the driver needs to look ahead. And you will find us as you're travelling north. We're on the left-hand side of the road, so we're on the eastern side of Horrocks Highway, and there's big signs: Passion for Great Reds, Claymore Wines, cellar door. So we're here 7 days.
7 days? 10 to 5?
11 till 5 on Monday to Saturday, and 11 till 4 Sundays and public holidays.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Clarissa.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack Australia. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.